Hello everyone, welcome again. I'm Dr. Lena Palaniappan. I am addressing the issue of the new education policy of India 2019. These are my personal opinions, and I'm describing some of the details of that 484-page document called NEP 2019. It's also called Kasturirangan report. This is my personal opinion, and I just want to say this is second part of a three-part discussion video that I produced. So please look at the first video as well to have a continuity of what I'm going to discuss. So in this second part, I'm going to focus on some of the specific false information, inaccurate information that's being included in this report. And again, I base these statements on my personal knowledge and my personal opinion, and you may differ. So in the previous part, I highlighted how the logic of arguments in this policy document are not correct. Most of the statements are illogical, so the document takes the shape of a propaganda rather than a policy. And in particular, I highlighted that the document starts from glorifying the past, name calling specific people, also uses very wrong logic to say to support what they propose. And also I highlighted that they're stacking up cards of all the positive things and not really considering the negative consequences, and also evidence that is in favor of having some negative discriminatory problems that results from this policy. So this was covered in the first part, and I'm continuing with some of the same issues, but I'm also going to focus on some very dangerous aspects that this report has. So what are the other problems in this report? So they take a bandwagon approach. What is a bandwagon approach? Propaganda documents usually invoke the desire to fit with the world. They instead of saying policy will be improving and making people's life better in a very specific way, they invoke the desire for the reader to fit with the world. So there are several statements in this document to encourage the bandwagon approach. So they talk about aspirational goals of 21st century education. They talk about technologically advanced countries of the world have naturally kept their own native languages. And this is very problematic statement because it has a number of logical fallacies. First of all, there is no causal relationship between keeping your own native language and being technologically advanced. There's no causal relationship between the two. And there's no document, there's no reference suggesting that. So making such kind of arguments which shows association between two groups is very dangerous, and it's called it's a very specific type of fallacy in logical arguments. In research we call it as ecological fallacy. Another example is, I can say so a very good example is just thinking that if you move to a rich country, you will become rich yourself, which is not true. So it's an illogical statement to make. There may be places which have very good technological advancement, and they may keep their languages, but there may not be any relationship between the two. The same document also makes internally contradictory statements. So on one point, the writer says English has become an international common language in certain realms such as science and technology research. So on one hand, they're saying technologically advanced countries are using their own languages. On the other hand, they're saying English is the international common language for science and technology. So there's a lot of contradictions like this, but they're using the arguments to just focus on what are they propagating, what they're propagating. So this is a propaganda document, not a policy document. They also invoke fear. This is a very specific technique that many political propaganda agents do. They whip up dislike, and they also create a sense of conspiracy. And just read what the writer of the policy says. Preferring English has kept the elite class and the jobs they control segregated from the economically weaker sections of society, which of course contain many hardworking, smart, high quality, high skilled and educated people who happen not to speak the language of the colonists and current elite. So they are creating a sensation as if the colonialism is coming back, They're also creating a sensation there is some sort of conspiracy that the elite people, the educated people who speak English are doing in order to take the jobs away from the weaker section of the society. They also say, the same document also says in the same paragraph, this power structure of language must be stopped at the earliest, as if there is a call for the common masses to unite and revolt against the system that's currently existing. So such calls are really appealing to emotion rather than reason, and there's no need for such language in a policy document. I'm just trying to highlight these things to make you see that it is not a policy document. It's clearly a propaganda document. They also do what is called a snob appeal. Snob appeal is indicating that the proposed idea is the best idea, so you have to agree with it. If you don't agree, you're going to lose on being special. This is one of the most commonly used advertising techniques. I'm sure you know this. You might have come across this in your own experience. I call this the Rolex effect. Rolex watches, for example, if you look at the advertisements for Rolex watches, they will always use words such as elegance. Some sort of superiority there. Okay, so the idea is if you have a Rolex watch, Rolex watches are elegant. So if you have a Rolex watch, you become elegant as well. That's the idea they try to promote. Every watch shows the time, right? So you don't really have to spend so much money to buy Rolex. But the advertising is to make you feel as if the idea is special. That means if you say yes to the idea, if you buy into the idea, you will also become special. So see what they say here. India aspires to take its place beside the United States and China as the third largest economy by 2030 to 2032. The same period during which this policy will bring about the biggest transformation. Unnecessarily, they're associating two completely different things. One is India is going to become a large economy in 2030 and 2032 based on the development India has had so far. Okay, based on the same educational system that these guys are criticizing. That education system has helped us to come to this state. So the projection has been made in 2030 we will be the third largest economy. But they're saying, but they're connecting that idea of us growing into third largest economy to this policy, even though there's no relationship at all between these two. So, but they try and deliberately imply causal associations, even though there are no associations. This is to make you feel you should not miss the boat. So again, it's not a sense of policy. There's a sense of propaganda here. Oh, this document is full of strong statements of facts with no references to any evidence backing these claims. I'll give you some examples. There are thousands of those examples in this document, but I'll just give you some examples. There are some statistics. Only about 15% of the country speaks English, compared with, example, 54% of Indians who speak Hindi. Well, this 54%, even if it is true, likely includes many other languages whose identity has been bulldozed by Hindi. And people who have been following the Indian census data since 1951 will know why this 54% is not representative of all Hindi-speaking people. Anyway, so there's no reference for any of these numbers. Where did they get these numbers from? We further observe that English has not become the international language that it was expected to become back in the 1960s. They're very sad that English is not an international language. Having said that, this document is written in English. All the consultation that they want is in English, and they've included several experts. All of them speak English. Anyway, so on what metric English has not become the international language? I do not know what metric they're using because they don't cite anything. They don't give any references. These are all just their own intuitive opinions, which is, anybody's intuitive opinion is questionable because it is simply based on that person's life experience. It may not be the truth that the collective society accepts. So you need to really question this. Then also say Indian languages are very scientifically structured. They have been specifically developed over centuries and generations to express thoughts in the Indian scenario, climate, and culture. This kind of nonsensical statements are present throughout the document. This foolish notion comes from the foolish notion that Indian languages are scientifically structured comes from a very infamous paper, a paper that claimed Sanskrit has the best structure for artificial intelligence programming. You can easily Google this information and you'll find out there's lots of discussions about it. I think the paper was written by a guy called Brugger, if I remember correctly. Maybe a true name or a pseudonym, who knows. But this was an infamous notion. This was not correct. This is not proved. This is just one single paper that came out suggesting that Sanskrit is the best suited language for artificial intelligence programming. Anyway, so they say Indian languages, what they mean is Sanskrit. I mean, the writers of this document have Sanskrit and Hindi in their mind whenever they talk about Indian languages. There's lots of unreliable, they use unreliable testimonials, and that's another propaganda technique. What is an unreliable testimonial? Try to sell your idea by using something that somebody told, an eminent person, um, whatever they said in a different context. Use what they said to sell and push your idea. If that is being done repeatedly, then the document is trying to propagate as a propaganda document. So what are they saying? They're citing one example. I will give you. There are many examples. One example: who's he, the former ambassador of China to the United States of America, said India conquered and dominated China culturally for 20 centuries without ever having to send a single soldier across her border. Again, this is a part of the glorification of the past agenda. You can read more about this person who's he and his ideas. It's very interesting. But basically, they're using this kind of unrelated testimonials, things that are spoken in different contexts to drive the idea that, to do this again, to conquer China, to become dominant again, we have to do something that 20 centuries of Indian history was doing. Concept transfer. So this is often used. Concept transfer is associating two unrelated concepts to transfer positive feelings that we have about one concept to another concept that is being sold to us. So look at the quote here. The Indian education system produced scholars like Charaka, Susruta, Aryabhatta, Bhaskaracharya, Chanakya, Patanjali, Panini, and numerous others. This is from the document. I'm not making this up. The Indian education system of those times is not the same concept that is being promoted now to us. They're not saying that these guys, Susruta, Aryabhatta, they're all, they're not, there's no way that these guys have gone through the proposed education system in this document. None of these people were trained under the new NEP scheme that is being proposed, but they're trying to make you feel good about all these historical figures so that you will buy into the idea that this kind of thing may happen if the Indian education system, olden education system comes back. Nobody knows how many people remain, they're not talking about how many people remained uneducated in the old Indian education system. They don't want to talk about it. Loaded words. They're using words that invoke strong public opinion, even though those concepts are not directly relevant. This is a document about education policy, but it says things like this in the document. Corruption remains an important element that distorts governance of education. The resolve to root out corruption from our public system is founded on the conviction that without a foundation of integrity and rectitude, we will not achieve the greatness as a country that is our due. This is all to make you feel, oh yeah, this is right. Corruption has to be taken away. There's no doubt about it. Everybody will agree with it, right? But they're using these things to create a halo effect of goodness so that you will buy into what they're trying to sell you. Now, this is very important. I want to emphasize this. This is not a policy on education. This is much more than that. The reach of this document is beyond education. It goes further beyond. It will cripple. It will go it will go and have an effect on the roots of our constitution, and I'll tell you why. Because me being a doctor, I have some understanding about the implication it will have on health systems. So let me talk about that. And other people can pick other facts as well that the document talks about in other areas of the Constitution. So in one place in the document, the writer says, although the NEP is not to be compared with the Constitution, its impact on the lives of over 50% of the citizens of the country who are below the age 25 years will be phenomenal. So they agree that the effect of this document will be same as the effect the Constitution has on our lives. So this is why I want you to take notice. So what are the different things they talk about, things that are not really education but beyond that? What do they say about health? Doctors as professionals on whom public is losing faith. So they portray doctors as people on whom public is losing faith. Having portrayed that picture, name calling, like I said earlier, they say many other things after calling out doctors as professionals without having losing faith with the public. So they're proposing Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy, Unani, Siddha, and homeopathy will be mainstreamed. Access for this will be improved by co-location in public facilities, which means simply all government hospitals should make space for these kind of treatments. Appointing Ayush physicians at the PHC levels will be evaluated and adapted. PHCs are primary health centers. This is where rural people living in the villages go for treatment with the doctors. So those hospitals are now going to be manned by Ayush physicians. They're also proposing lateral entry into MBBS. So you can get into the MBBS course even if you study the Ayush courses, and you can come into the MBBS course at any time, well, at second year. They're also proposing centralized exit examination for MBBS. All of this will have an effect on the number of doctors that you get in this country. It will have an effect on the type of people who can become doctors. It will also have an effect on the kind of cost that you pay to receive health in this country. They're also suggesting nurse practitioner courses will be introduced so that nurses can replace doctors wherever doctors are not available. This will create a two-tier system in India. You will have areas where patients are willing to pay money for health services, and you will see doctors in those areas, and you will see nurses in rural and other areas where there's economic disadvantage. So this is all, all these proposals have significant impact. They cannot be just passed on us without significant examination and critical examination. There are a lot of dangerous, untested ideas in this document. The first year or two of the MBBS course will be designed as a common period for all science graduates, after which they can take up MBBS, BDS, nursing, or other specializations. So they're going to be diluting the first 2 years of MBBS course. This might mean that it will take longer for doctors to graduate. Already doctors take 6 years to graduate. If it becomes longer, most economically backward families where you cannot wait for your son or daughter to start earning money for 10 or 15 years, those families will automatically say no. MBBS means it's going to be a significant delay before we become economically independent, so they won't send their children to medical colleges. This is going to have long lasting and large impact on our system. They also propose that common foundational courses based on medical pluralism will be followed by core courses focused on specialized systems in medical education. What nonsense is this? Common foundation courses based on medical pluralism. What is medical pluralism? They don't define that early on, but if you read the 484 pages of this document, there is a mention at some point that medical pluralism actually means Ayush approach. Ayush stands for Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Siddha, and Homeopathy. So basically, all first 2 years of the foundational course of medicine will include learning about all this stuff. There are a lot of outright lies in this document. The numbers and the quality of MBBS doctors being produced has been deteriorating. On what metric? There is no clarity here. There is definitely no reduction in numbers of doctors, MBBS doctors coming out of medical colleges in India. There has been so many new medical colleges opened up in the last several years. So this is outright lie. Okay. They're also talking about compulsory rotation. Internship has become non-existent and it will be reintroduced. To my knowledge, you have to do at least 1 year of residency before you get the MBBS degree almost in all parts of India. So again, this could be a very much of a outright lie, and I'm only picking up lies in medicine and medical education. Given my background, there may be more lies hiding in this document. It talks about arts education, it talks about law education, it talks about engineering. So people who have expertise in these areas, friends with law, engineering, and other professional backgrounds, please analyze this report further and pick out the lies that these guys are creating. There is a lot of nonsense in this document. I call this nonsense as pseudoscience mumbo jumbo. I'll give you one example of the pseudoscience mumbo jumbo in this document. At the moment, students generally only learn how to count up to 1 crore, which is hardly sufficient in today's world. In order to talk about the numbers needed for life and work in modern times, students must be taught the first several powers of 10. 1, 10, 100,000, 10,000, lakh, 10 lakh, crore, 10 crore, Arab, 10 Arab, Karab, 10 Karab, Neel, 10 Neel, Padma, 10 Padma, Shank, 10 Shank, Mahashank, so that they can understand and speak about larger numbers early on and throughout their lives. So every day we should talk about 10 Shank and Mahashank and all those things. This is a lot of nonsense here. And just if you think this is nonsense, look at this slide, the slide I have in front of you now. Neuroscience nonsense. I'm a neuroscientist, so I know how much nonsense of neuroscience this document has. At one point, they say the number of brain cells in a human and the number of stars in our galaxy is each about 1 crab. Over 85% of cumulative brain development occurs prior to the age of 6. If higher education is moved entirely into large multidisciplinary institutes, it would enable students to develop both sides of their brains. This is probably the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard. So if education system moves into large institutes, then people will have both sides of the brain developing. At the moment, we only have one side of the brain developing. I think only right side, maybe only left side, I do not know. So we all have a congenital defect in our brains because we did not study in large multidisciplinary institutes. Experience with the arts will bring out the creative and innovative side of the brain. A liberal arts education, as so beautifully described and practiced in India's past, enables one to truly develop both sides of the brain, both the creative side and the analytical side. This is utter nonsense. Physical activity, exercise, these things help your brain much more than sitting and listening to Natyanjali or Bharatanatyam, or sitting and listening to Margari music festival in Madras. First of all, there is no experiments that have proven that both sides of the brain have to equally develop. There's no experiments that have been conducted to show that exposure to liberal arts will help to grow your brain tissue, neurons and glial tissue and all those things. Anyway, these people make statements like this throughout this document. Lots of nonsensical, pseudo-scientific statements in order to sell the idea they're trying to sell you. I also want to say that this document, this a new educational policy, it starts with the term new, but this is not about modernization. The word ancient occurs 16 times. They glorify ancient India, and the ancient word is used always in reference to Sanskrit books or old universities like Nalanda and Takshashila, where Sanskrit was taught as a main course. Sanskrit books that are revered by the esteemed writer of this policy includes the following books: Banabhatta's Kadambari, Lalita Vistara Sutra, Yasodhara's Jayamangala, Bharada's Natyashastra, Chanakya, Panini, Maurya, Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, Bhaskara, Madhava, Baudanya, Virahanka, and Pingala's writing. At one point they say, Banabhatta's Kadambari described the 64 kalas or arts, wherein truly educated person was described as one who mastered all the 64 kalas. This is very close to what the liberal arts refers to today. The number of kalas grew over time. 86 became 512 in Lalita Vistara Sutra across various human endeavors mentioned in Yasodhara's Jayamangala in the 13th century. So they keep making references to some obscure Sanskrit text and textbooks. They also say Indian literature is replete with instances of cross-disciplinary works combining various subjects across the arts and science, such as Bharata's Natya Shastra, largely about music and dance, but also delves deeply into the connections with the principles of mathematics and physics. Anyway, so I don't know whether these are right or wrong. I'm no place to judge, but clearly this document is not taking you to the future. This is taking you to the past. This is not about modernization. The most worrying thing I read in this document is the big mission Nalanda and mission Takshashila that they are proposing. They're very worrying plans. They call mission Nalanda is the plan to create small number of universities, which they say will provide world-class liberal arts education, and these universities will be modeled after some of the best universities in the world history, such as Nalanda and the Ivy League schools in the US. I do not know how they will combine the principles of Nalanda administration with the principles of administrations of Yale University or Harvard University. But they're going to do that. We're going to have Ivy League Nalanda very soon in India. They also propose that IITs must move towards more liberal education, which integrates arts and humanities, where arts and humanities students must aim to learn more science. They are proposing to create IILA, Indian Institute of Liberal Arts, and multidisciplinary education research universities called MERUs, and they're going to prioritize that. If the document talks about lots of stuff, but they have an action plan with the timelines given at the end of the document, and it's very clear. Even though they have some inclusive parts in the document, it's very clear the priority that they're going to give for is creating these liberal art Bharatanatyam universities and creating these what they call as multidisciplinary education research universities. There are some other important moves in this document. There's going to be reduction in the autonomy of states in the area of education. They're talking about creating renaming the Central Ministry of Human Resource Development to become the Ministry of Education. So education will firmly be put in the central government's hands. They're inviting foreign universities to India to come and set up shop. They're increasing private sector involvement in higher education. Universities will get funding to promote foreign students to come here and study Indian languages, arts, history, Ayurveda, yoga. So the way that they have worded it is It is not just improving access to these Indian sciences like Ayurveda, yoga. They're saying that universities will get money to do this specifically. So they're going to actively promote universities to set up these courses and bring foreign students here to learn that. So, we often criticize things that we read, but what are the things that are not included in this document? Can we actually think about important glaring omissions? In my knowledge, one important glaring omission in new education policy is they're not talking much about physical education or sports. They only make a cursory mention. They say something like every school should have a ground, maidan to play, something like that. But they're not making any commitment to start any physical education institutes. This is not the strength of some section of the society, right? So they're not really trying to set up a plan to improve sports access, improve sports education, except very clearly they say yoga will form an integral part of education. You can guess why it is in this way. I mean, it may be a deliberate thing, or it may be for some other reason. I do not know. I don't want to think about conspiracy, where inefficiency could be a better explanation. Stupidity could be a better explanation than conspiracy in many places. Okay, so I'm stopping here, and I will do a third part of this video, where I'm going to tell you what you can do at this stage before June 30th. What can you do in order to put some brakes on this radical constitutional plan change, constitutional policy change. Thank you.